appreciate Dr. Russell Blaylock spending over an hour and a half with us lined up today. Dr. Russell Blaylock is a board-certified neurosurgeon, author, and lecturer. He attended the LSU School of Medicine in New Orleans and completed his general surgical internship as a neurosurgical residency at the Medical University of South Carolina at Charleston, South Carolina. During his residency, he ran the neurology program for 1 year and did a fellowship in neurosurgery after his residency. For the last 25 years, he has practiced neurosurgery in addition to having a nutritional practice. He recently retired from both practices and devoted full time to nutritional studies and research. Dr. Blaylock has written and illustrated 3 books. The first book was on the subject of excitotoxins, the taste that kills, and it just goes on and on. He developed a lot of widely used forms of procedures in brain surgery, and you just go to his website, BlaylockReport.com. That's Blaylock, BLAYLOCK, report.com. And he's here today to talk about the flu first, the chemicals they put in there to create an autoimmune response, why the government's having to admit now in rats causing neurodegenerative diseases, causing all sorts of joint problems, early onset of just all sorts of problems. Dr. Blaylock's going to go over that today, but also then what's happening with the excitotoxins, what's happening with MSG, what's happening with aspartame, and why he believes this is going on. This is important. I mean, this is really going on. And now we have the medical report that has been put out, internally leaked out of the CDC here in the U.S. and the British medical system in England, that it's causing these degenerative brain diseases. Dr. Blaylock, sorry, we lost you there. Right. I was bringing up, we're about to go to break, but I was bringing up these internal reports that have now been leaked, saying exactly what you said years ago, that these vaccines are causing all sorts of brain disorders.
Right. Well, you know, what we're looking at now, because of the new discoveries of stealth viruses, this could be much greater than we know, because a lot of these neurological disorders are more immediate. But the stealth viruses, these hidden viruses in vaccines, could cause neurological disease decades later, which really makes it difficult to make that positive connection. And that's sort of what they depend on, is that the connection's hard to make. We went through that with the excitotoxins in food, because of the difference in the time of exposure and the appearance of the neurologic disorder. But we have much better evidence now than we had before.
Okay, we're going to go to break. Long segment coming up. I'm going to try to just sit back and have you go through not just the viruses and RNA in these vaccines, but what is the mercury doing? What is the squalene doing? Why do we see massive increases in all sorts of different diseases in the literature being associated with the vaccines? With Dr. Russell Blaylock. Please stay with us. Hello.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Okay, Dr. Russell Blaylock has just joined us for stations that just tuned in, or listeners. It's BlaylockReport.com. He is a brain surgeon, neurologist, for decades speaking out against vaccines causing degenerative diseases. I had Dr. Horowitz on earlier, whose mother was killed by this Gillian Bernay or Murray, where the body has an autoimmune response and starts eating the nerves. The media is admitting that it can kill you. The media is now having to admit that Gardasil's killing people. Dr. Blaylock, why do the vaccines attack the nerves in the body?
Well, just the vaccine itself, the trick that they're always, or the problem they're always dealing with, is trying to make the body react to the agent that you want to immunize against, for instance, flu. Trying to get the body to react intensely enough to give you immunity for a prolonged period of time. Well, the whole basis of vaccination is unphysiological. Almost all the infections that enter the body go through either the nasal passages or the GI tract. Well, that's where 80% of your immune system exists, and it's designed to have the first exposure to these agents, and it's all carefully coordinated. Well, what you're doing with a vaccine, you're bypassing that, injecting it into deep muscle tissue, which is completely an abnormal entrance for this organism. And so you get an abnormal immune reaction, particularly in children, small babies. You get a very abnormal reaction. And that's been well documented in the scientific literature. But in order to try to make your body react, they add what's called immune adjuvants to it. Now, these are various chemicals that cause your body to have a very intense immune reaction. Some of the only adjuvant approved in the United States is aluminum compound, primarily alum. They put that in there to make your immune system react and to cause the immune system to interact with the agent itself, for instance, measles, mumps, rubella, whatever. The problem that we have is manyfold. The aluminum not only produces an abnormal, intense immune reaction that's prolonged, but the aluminum itself diffuses out into the body, including the brain, and accumulates, and it stays there for a lifetime. So each time you get a vaccination, you're getting a dose of aluminum. Now, the proof of that was done by a study in which they put a radioactive tag on the aluminum that was in a vaccine that's given to people. And they injected it and traced it to see where it would go. And they found out it disseminated all over the body, but also the brain. Well, that was a single vaccine. Today, children are getting about 40-some-odd vaccines before they start school. Well, that's at least 35, 36 vaccines with aluminum in it. So they're getting 36 times the amount of aluminum that was in that study, and all of that goes in the brain. Over a lifetime, they're talking about giving people as many as 200, 250 vaccines.
Sir, is that why, just interrupting Dr. Blaylock, is that why I see the studies where you get a doubling or a tripling, depending on what study I look at, on people above 60 that get 3 or more flu shots of Alzheimer's?
Well, yeah, because not only does, for instance, the flu vaccine, not only will it contain the aluminum, it also contains a full dose of mercury. And we know that mercury and aluminum interact in the brain and produce a rather intense destructive reaction, and that the aluminum and mercury stay in the brain for decades, if not a lifetime. Very difficult to remove. And that while it's in the brain, it changes into a much more toxic form of mercury, the ionic mercury. All of this has been proven in the neuroscience literature. The problem is the people giving the vaccines, that is your family doctor, your internist, your pediatrician, they're not aware of any of this literature. They don't read these things. They just read a pamphlet that comes from the CDC or from their specialty.
Yeah, that's what's crazy is that I can be at a family event talking to somebody in my family who's a pediatrician, and I'll go, well, I read the studies put out by a major university where it increases Alzheimer's to take the vaccines, and I have this study that Gardasil's killing people, and I have this study that in all the rat species they give vaccines, they see massive increases in really debilitating arthritis, and that these chemicals that are causing the autoimmune response are burning out all these different, and they're like, well, you're not a doctor. And I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I'm saying the doctors are saying this, and they look at me like I'm crazy.
Right. Well, you know, the first thing you have to realize is that when physicians go to medical school, when I went to medical school, there was virtually no instructions on vaccines. You took a 2-week immunology course. They're pretty intense, but it was just 2 weeks long, and that was your exposure to immunology. Well, you hardly had any time to learn about the intricacies of vaccines. I doubt that there's much more instruction today. You learn a lot about the mechanism of immune reaction, but you're not taught about vaccines in specific. So physicians generally don't know a lot about it, and they're not going to scientific literature researching these things, looking at these things. And the vast majority of physicians know absolutely nothing about neuroscience. And so when you start talking about microglia being activated in excitotoxicity and immune reactions in the brain, they really don't know what you're talking about. That's not their specialty.
Well, sir, I'm not a doctor, but I know if I eat a big bag of Doritos with MSG in it, I get a headache an hour later. And before I ever heard this stuff was bad, by the time I was a teenager, I started avoiding MSG. I didn't even know what MSG was. I just knew, don't eat Chinese food, don't eat Doritos.
Right. Well, you and millions of others made that observation while the physicians were denying it. And for decades, all the big journals, New England Journal of Medicine, was denying there was any such thing as the Chinese restaurant syndrome. Well, now it's proven beyond all doubt, and we know that these exposures produce certain destructions of brain connections and the exact mechanism of what it does. For decades, they denied that monosodium glutamate entered the brain. Well, now we have absolutely proof it does enter the brain and produces these changes, particularly in the young during the most intense brain formation. Well, one of the effects of repeated intense vaccination is that it activates these cells in the brain that release glutamate in high concentration, producing the same effect, but even worse because there's an interaction of the immune reaction in the brain with the excitotoxicity, something that I coined the term immunoexcitotoxicity, which is now in the medical literature. And this is a major mechanism for most of your neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and Lou Gehrig's and Guillain-Barré and all of these things that we're now hearing about. Well, the interesting thing is the number of immunologic autoimmune diseases has increased, virtually exploded. The immunologists are all in a quandary of trying to figure out why, what has happened in the last 30 years that's triggered this incredible increase in every type of autoimmune disease, particularly those affecting the brain. Well, they've toyed with environmental factors. They say, well, there must be chemicals in the air or exposure to nanoparticles of diesel fuel, everything but the most obvious, which is vaccines. The number of vaccines in the last 30 years has increased just astronomically.
Because they can't point the finger back at, I mean, you look at these medical journals and reports, half the ads are drug ads and vaccine ads.
Exactly.
But as this is ravaging their own families, well, I mean, I know you're a brain scientist, a brain surgeon, a neurologist, but why is it linked to the diabetes in the literature? Why is it linked, I mean, conclusively from what I've seen and other medical doctors we've had on, to, teenagers and young people getting really serious disorders of the joints and the arthritis? I mean, how is it doing that?
Well, it's the same autoimmune type reaction. Rather than the brain, it's attacking the cartilage in the joints, and it's attacking the beta cells in the pancreas, producing diabetes, and it's autoimmune reaction in the lungs, producing asthma. So all of these different diseases we know that are linked to these abnormal immune reactions are being connected to this immunization program, and the countries that have periodically outlawed certain vaccines, the incidence of type 1 diabetes and asthma has fallen precipitously. So we have very good circumstantial evidence of the connection to the vaccine policy. The problem is, as you say, they're advertising in all the medical journals. They contribute huge amounts of money for medical education and support of medical schools. They wine and dine residents and interns. I'm talking about pharmaceutical company makers. So there's so much financial influence throughout the media because of their heavy advertising on all the media that you can't get this story out despite the fact you have overwhelming hard scientific evidence of this happening. It's just like vaccine contamination. That is so well demonstrated, yet we just can't get that story out except through programs like yours, which is telling the people from vaccine is contaminated. And the scary thing is contaminated with agents that could produce cancer and neurological diseases as long as 2 or 3 decades after, and even be transmitted to your offspring.
All right, doctor, stay there. That's incredible information. Medical doctor, literally trailblazed many of the modern medical terms being used. We'll be right back. We're going to continue discussing what Dr. Blaylock is documenting here, what the vaccines, what the excitotoxins that are in our foods are doing, what's in our water, what the fluoride's doing, and then why he believes they're doing it. He has massive evidence about the eugenics. And I just really appreciate Dr. Blaylock spending time with us. The website is BlaylockReport.com. BlaylockReport.com. A bunch of invaluable papers and documents and articles and books available, and a special reports you can sign up for. This guy's the real deal. And, again, I was reading stuff he wrote 10, 15 years ago, as he was saying, is now in the major medical journals, the terms he invented. Dr. Blaylock, you were starting, and this is a short segment, long one coming up, to get into the contamination of vaccines, not just what they're putting in there that you and others have proven is very bad and causing autoimmune responses and toxicity and other problems, but what happens in the manufacturing of it, and that a lot of these vaccines are grown on fetal retinas and caterpillar eggs and all sorts of other weird stuff.
Well, yeah, in order to grow a virus, you have to have living tissue. The classic tissue was monkey kidney tissue. Rhesus monkey was the beginning. And then they used the African green monkey, and now they use other type cells. But all of these cells, if they're living, they're contaminated with other organisms, and they have inserted in their DNA carcinogenic viruses. They have mycoplasma. And a number of studies in which they took just vials of vaccines used for humans found a contamination rate varying between 30% and 60% for well-recognized organisms. Now, you have to realize that these kidney cells are contaminated with thousands of viruses, many of which have never been identified. So unless you're looking for a specific virus, you're not going to find it. We know that some of these viruses take a long time to culture out. You have to culture them for months to get this virus out. And one of the more recently recognized things is the stealth virus, which does not cannot be determined the usual detection mechanism. It takes a very complicated process to make these viruses show themselves. But the stealth viruses are being connected very strongly with cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, and a number of diseases that can come on decades after being exposed to them through the vaccines. So that the potential of serious disease associated with vaccines is just enormous. Now, they have conferences on this all the time, but most of the conferences are closed door. They don't invite the media. They never release the results of this to the media. Sometimes you'll see it in the science magazines, for instance, like Science or Nature. And one conference I read about said that they admitted that most of the vaccines were contaminated with DNA fragments and RNA fragments from viruses of various sorts. And they asked the virologist, well, do you think this is a danger to humans that you're injecting this? And they said, well, we don't really know. We hope not. But, the scientific studies of DNA fragments shows that they're inserted in the human genome. And so you can have a cancer-causing gene inserted into your gene that's passed on to your children. In fact, you wrote about this. I remember interviewing you 5-6 years ago. You were talking about it. 2 days ago, the BBC admitted that these big studies show suddenly we're mutating faster, and that scientists don't know why when the answer's right in front of them. And if you pass the autoimmune defenses of the mouth, the nose, and the guts and shoot stuff right into everybody, I mean, any mother knows puncture wounds are dangerous, much less injecting stuff grown on dead fetuses or dead monkeys. Sure, and if you're injecting a mycoplasma, for instance, well, that mycoplasma is going to grow throughout the body, and it's an intracellular organism. Very, very difficult to cure a mycoplasmal infection. And we know that mycoplasma is associated with cancer, a number of cancers. So to inject these contaminated viruses and mycoplasma into people is just terrifying. To me, that's one of the most terrifying aspects of these vaccines, is that they know they're contaminated with multiple agents, and they continue to vaccinate people, just like they did with the SD40, with the polio virus.
Let's talk about that when we come back, Dr. Blaylock, and then also some of the other things in our food and water and the great research you've done on that, and then other areas that you think are important to get into. I also want to ask you what it was like when you awakened to this in your practice as a neurologist and as a brain surgeon. We'll be right back with Dr. Russell Blaylock. Hey, going back to Dr. Blaylock. Dr. Blaylock, you got interrupted by the break. You were trying to bring up the fact that they know this is in the vaccines, the contamination, but they continue to just go along with it. And as we see all the different diseases and autoimmune problems and toxicity being generated by this, we then see a compounding with the aspartame in thousands of products, the MSG under new names in almost everything I try to buy at the store. I mean, it's ridiculous. I know instantly when I have ingested MSG, I feel within a few minutes or nearly instantly. The fluoride they're putting in the water. Can you break down the things that are in our environment, and then from your research, why this is happening?
Well, the fluoride, for instance, it's interesting that there's such compelling evidence that fluoride added to water does not reduce cavities at all. And even the American Dental Association has admitted that. So you have to ask yourself, well, if it doesn't reduce cavities, what's the purpose of it? Their flimsy excuse was, well, as the water flows over your teeth, it may topically strengthen your teeth. Well, of course, that's silly nonsense that a fourth grader would see through. So there's no justification, but we do know, and the National Research Institute did a very comprehensive study confirming what all the opponents of fluoridation have shown, and that is that fluoride is a powerful accumulative poison, meaning that it accumulates in the body and can stay there for a lifetime. It destroys bone, increases fractures and osteoporosis. It accumulates in the brain, combines with the aluminum, produces a very neurotoxic fluoroaluminum compound. All of this is known, so you're in a quandary as to, well, if it doesn't even attain its objective, that is reducing cavities, and everybody admits that, and it has all of these toxic effects. It even increases the budding of flu virus, that is the spread of flu virus in your body. What is the purpose? What are you putting it in the water for? Why does the government send its agents to little small townships that vote not to fluoridate their water? Why do they use the expense to send government agents from Washington, D.C. To pressure these people to vote it back in and use government granting to entice them to put fluoride back in the water? What's the purpose? Well, we don't have hard evidence, but we know fluoride has a definite behavioral effect on the brain. It can produce an apathy-like syndrome. It can affect the ability to think clearly. So is it a financial deal they have with the manufacturers of aluminum and the manufacturers of fertilizers to get rid of this waste product? What exactly is it? Well, you can use your imagination, but we know one thing: it has absolutely nothing to do with dental health. The MSG in the food, the research now is so compelling that it affects the formation and development of the brain, that it significantly can accelerate a number of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, and migraine headaches, and a number of things, particularly behavioral changes in children, anger, violence. It's strongly connected to depression, particularly geologic severe depression. So now that we know all these things and our neuroscience are connected to glutamate, why is the food filled with the glutamate additive that we know can trigger these conditions, including suicide? And that there's an interaction between fluoride and glutamate. There's an interaction between fluoride, aluminum, glutamate, and vaccination. That we know if you vaccinate an animal and expose them, for instance, to mercury, aluminum, it dramatically increases the toxicity of those two elements. So with all this abundant, hard neuroscience showing these interacting toxicities, why is the so-called protectors of the public, the EPA and the FDA, not getting these agents out of our food and halting this destructive and idiotic fluoridation in water campaign? Well, they're even talking about making it a federal law that every water system in America must be fluoridated.
Exactly. Now that the American people and the people of the world are fighting back and having it removed, and they admit it doubles the chances of males, adolescent males, to get bone cancer, they just admit that. I've had the scientist that leads the EPA union on, and 90+% of their scientists signed a letter saying, please take it out, because, and we've gotten a tour of the Austin water supply, and the people working there agreed with us. They said, yeah, we're told by the city to do this. We pay millions a year for it, and all it is the toxic waste left over from fertilizer manufacturing. They mine the limestone and then remove the chemicals they want and then leave the toxic waste, and it's over 100 chemicals they put in our water under the name fluoride. That's just so it's so insane, though, that the average person says there must be a reason for it, even though the American Dental Association now says kids shouldn't brush their teeth with fluoride toothpaste because it gives them dental fluorosis and makes the teeth shatter. My dad's a dentist. He now understands that, but if people want fluoride, he'll still give it to them. But, I mean, it's just amazing that this is going on, and we know from the literature that this is part of eugenics.
Well, we know that fluoride has a powerful effect on the reproductive system of both males and females and produces infertility and reduced fertility. We know mercury does the same thing, so you're injecting children with high doses of mercury. We know that also has a damaging effect on the reproductive organs. We know that a number of these agents that we're being exposed to affect fertility. Now, either you have to conclude, well, the government is just made up of a bunch of buffoons who choose to ignore the synergistic interaction of all these things that they're ordering into our food and water and its effect on reproduction and fertility, or they're doing it on purpose. Now, if you talk to young people, and I talked to my sons about this, I said, I've noticed that there's just an explosion of fertility clinics growing all over the country because young people are having such difficulty with their wives getting pregnant. And he said, yeah, a number of his friends have had that problem because, you've either got to conclude, well, something else is in the air and the water and the food that's producing infertility for this sudden change in fertility of our young people, or possibly someone's doing this on purpose with this combination fluoride, mercury vaccination exposure and glutamate exposure to reduce fertility.
But I mean, Dr. Blaylock, you in the past on this show have read amazing quotes by the Rockefellers and in their own textbooks and documents where they admit they're eugenicists and wanted to create a medical tyranny to reduce the population. And then just recently, Eco Science, the textbook written by the White House science czar, John P. Holdren, about how they would implant us with devices to sterilize us, put drugs in the water, lower our libido, and sterilize us, set up a planetary government to do this, eradicate the family, using the educational system as the wedge to start that. And then since then, all these other books he wrote and government textbooks have come out describing exactly what they're now doing. And I have him in congressional hearings where Jay Rockefeller says, oh, you walk on water. Oh, you're the master planner. oh, you're the great builder. It appears that they have adopted his plan. Now, we know there were previous ones that were similar, but it's like they treat him like a rock star when he's on Letterman, when he's before committees. And it appears that his plan from 1977, in this case, was adopted.
Well, yeah, and as I told you on that previous program when we were talking about the Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Foundation and Ford, they were spending virtually millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on population control, eugenics, and sterilization. And if you read their literature, I'm talking about some of the most powerful, influential people in society in the 1910, 1920 era, it was very open, this call for controlling a population and reducing the level of the unfit and people without social utility. They were quite open about it. Well, they're not quite as open about it, but they're still writing about these things in the literature. And these are people that are very influential, writing in prestigious journals and magazines. If you look at the group of papers collected by the Hastings Center, which Ezekiel Emanuel, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, the health czar for Obama, his papers are calling for this very thing, that we need to let the elderly die and stop giving them health care because they're an expense to the society and they have no right to live. Well, this was a very similar thing that we heard in the 1910s and 20s being funded on a massive scale by the Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford Foundation, being funded on a massive scale by the Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford Foundation. And at the same time in Germany, I'm talking about in 1910, long before Hitler came along, their society was just flooded with the same literature, and so was Austria, talking about the need to control the unfit and to control.
And we know who funded that, the Rockefellers, again, with the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute,
Exactly.
almost single-handedly bankrolled it, along with Thomas Watson of IBM.
And much of their literature came from the United States. They were quoting the literature that was produced by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. So Hitler grew up in a society that openly was discussing the need to eliminate the unfit and the people that were disabled. That's
right.
bill,
Hitler thought the U.S. and England were going to join him. And that's why the King of England, Edward VIII at the time, was a Nazi, and Hitler was on Time magazine, and, man, he's doing a great job sterilizing and killing the retarded kids, and, my God, we need to have more of this here, and we can drug the water, and then they went underground, and now they're doing it to us, and the general public better wake up.
Well, the problem with the average person is they're not reading what these people are writing, because they're openly writing about a lot of this now. The need to regulate and control society. If you read this health care bill, and I've read all 1,017 pages and analyzed various sections of it in detail, it is designed to eliminate the unwanted people. And it conforms exactly to this Rockefeller idea that certain people are not fit to live in society and they have no right to be here. And that governments should decide who has the right to live in the United States and who doesn't. I wrote a paper recently called Social Utility. Who should we let mom, grandmother, and grandpa live? Well, that I go through.
Well, that's the thing. I want you to comment on that. But Daschle wrote a book saying if you're 60, you don't get eye surgery, you don't get brain surgery,
and that's what they do in the socialized healthcare system.
But that's the thing, is they write it. Emanuel's brother says it. The bill says we're going to do what this board recommends. And then you read what the board recommends, and it's what you just said. And then they lie and say we're not doing this, just like they have bills introduced for compulsory service, and Obama wants it, and he's going to have the kids form up in front of him next week, literally with telescreens like 1984. Sure. And then now he's saying, well, what's wrong with that? I mean, sure. Dr. Blaylock, do you ever pinch yourself, even though you study this and expose it, that it's really happening, that these people really are in control?
Well, it's happening so rapidly. You know, as I tell people, if you go back 40 years, you had a hard time getting a politician to admit he was a liberal. Well, now they proudly not only say they're liberals, but that they're far left. most of the time on TV they say from the left. Well, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you would never hear a politician say it's from the left, because that's admitting I'm a socialist or a communist, that I'm a collectivist. But they're proud of it now, and what happened when we got the Obama administration is they felt, well, the people want collectivism, and therefore we can move ahead full steam.
Well, look at Van Jones saying, hey, the green jobs is to take the economy over for total redistribution of wealth. I mean, these people mean business.
That's collectivism. And it's the idea that there's a group of wise people who tell the rest of society what their duty is. And this health corps, this core of young people being drafted is exactly that. You have a duty to do what your government tells you to do and help it. Recruit other people into the
Amazing. Amazing. Dr. Blaylock, stay there. When we come back, I want to get it more into the eugenics master plan and then take phone calls at 1-800-259-9231. All right, Dr. Blaylock will be with us 40 minutes in the next hour. Then I'm getting into Van Jones, how they're trying to tie him into 9/11 Truth. Your call's coming up. We start the next hour in a few minutes at 1-800-259-9231, specifically on vaccines, excitotoxins, eugenics. That's a big area, but specifically for Dr. Russell Blaylock. Doctor, you said you just did a 2-hour rundown program on the healthcare bill. You read the whole thing. I've scanned through it. We have your report, social utility, how much are grandpa and grandma worth? And we've got that linked up on INFOWARS.com. It's also at BlaylockReport.com. Run through what's really in the bill. As a medical doctor, as a brain surgeon, as a neurologist, what this really does.
If you look through the bill, one of the first things to assure everybody, you'll be able to keep your insurance if you like it. That is an absolute lie. What you're going to be faced with, and your employer is going to be faced with, is that if you keep your private insurance, there are penalties you're going to have to pay. And, of course, for the people covering your insurance, it's going to behoove them in terms of finances to move you forcibly into the public option. So you will lose the high-quality coverage that you have at your business. Now, for individual insured people, they tack on so many requirements, mandates, audits, financial things that have to be met by the insurance company and the insured person that you'll no longer be able to pay your premiums. They would just be
so this is a whole new bureaucracy where they fine you if you don't have insurance, and then like a new agency like the IRS come in and manage your life.
Well, not only do you pay a 2.5% excise tax for not having insurance, and on top of that, if you have higher income, say you make $250,000 to $300,000 total worth, that's not your income, but total worth, then they tack on another percentage, and it can go up to as much as 8.59% tax that you're going to pay above your other taxes because you didn't take the public option, or you just choose to get a health savings account. You're going to be punished severely for that. So you will be forcibly moved into the public option unless you're just enormously rich and resist them. The really scary thing of this bill is that you read through it, almost everywhere it says things are left up to the discretion of the Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services. So as you're reading the bill, you find that it's not actually spelled out. It says this will be determined 18 months later, or this will be determined a year later by the Secretary of HHS. Coding, criteria, who will be included, all this will be determined later. So you're signing a bill in which there's very few specifics added in many of these sections.
Well, that's what's happening with the cybersecurity, where they admit it so they can take the web over. That's what the gun bills do. They have a bill that says the Attorney General can ban any and all guns whenever he feels like it. They're openly setting up a dictatorship.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as you read through this bill, you become more and more frightened because, for instance, it says all physicians are in the public option whether they want to be or not, that they have to specifically apply to remove themselves from the public option, that is being a federal doctor, and that the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary will decide the mechanism by which you're allowed to leave, which you could make it so difficult and so financially punishing. Most doctors won't leave because they're going to need doctors, and they're not going to want them to live. It says that she has control over all payments to physicians, hospitals, nursing homes. Is at her discretion as to what they will be paid.
And the incredible thing is, most scary, is I've read these sections you're talking about. When you bring them up, they just say, you're a liar. It doesn't exist. Final hour, 70 seconds away. Stay with us.
Waging war on corruption. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Dr. Russell Blaylock is our guest for another 40 minutes. I'm going to get into Obama's big push to have the youth line up and become his friend and help him. You got Al Gore telling school kids all over the country on tape, don't do what your parents say, global warming's real, work with the government. Van Jones saying, we are going to overthrow America. And they try to hook him up with 9/11 truth. We'll break that down coming up. Dr. Russell Blaylock's our guest. Okay, next segment, I'm going to start going to your phone calls. Dr. Blaylock was just running through some of the total dictatorial blank check takeover, and that's everything Obama's doing is just at our discretion, Well, and go ahead.
It's interesting. The other day I was watching TV, and they had one of the leftist politicians saying, oh, there's absolutely no rationing in this bill. Virtually every page is rationing. And the penalties on physicians for just minor misinterpretation of rules or regulations, there's enormous civil penalties. And what we know in national health systems is with time they get further and further in debt. And in order to make up that loss, they start increasing the number of penalties and cutting physician pay. Well, after a while, a physician's pay is going to be so low that he's no longer going to be able to maintain his office, which is going to be so low that he's no longer going to be able to maintain his office, which means they're going to have to sell it to the federal government. And the federal government will take over all physicians' offices. Well, this happened where I used to practice in North Carolina, just under the Medicare, Medicaid, and managed care system. I warned the physicians it was coming. They chose not to list it. I left and moved to Mississippi. All of their offices were purchased by the regulatory agencies, and it ruined all of their practices. Well, this is going to be much, much worse. We're going to federalize virtually every segment that has anything to do with health care.
But look at it. The roads are being grabbed. The auto industries are being bankrupted. And the bailout money goes to build the factories in China, Europe, and Brazil. This is corporate receivership where these foreign banks use the government to come in. And now they're even taking over the essential services. This is the total state.
Well, absolutely. Listen to this. This is the rating of physicians. One of the things they want to sell this bill is we're going to give you high-quality health care, and we have built into it quality measures. Well, on page 258, line 13 through 17, on evaluating physicians for quality medical care performance, it says the performance will be based on satisfactory submitting data on the quality measures. In other words, it's not the actual quality that we're measuring. It's how well the physicians do what we tell them in terms of submitting forms and paperwork to the federal government. If you're a good little boy and a good little girl and you submit your paperwork on time and you do all the paperwork they demand, then you're qualified as a very high-quality medical care facility.
Well, sir, I mean, look at government offices falling apart, total lazy bureaucrats everywhere. Now they want to take health care over, and they're going to be rating people. and going after people with political weapons. I mean, this is just an amazing tyranny, and every time I see another piece of it, each piece by itself is enough for a revolution. But you put it all together, the thing they have going for them is it's so bold that the government's going to take over and tell you who's good and who isn't. I mean, this is insane. And then I go back to it, Dr. Blaylock, they then lie about it and say they're not doing this.
Well, one of the big things that really got people fired up was the idea of the advanced care planning, is the euphemistic term, which was the death panels, where we have consultation with the elderly and the chronically ill and the disabled to convince them that it'd probably be better if they just moved on into another life and give up their life for the good of the state. Well, if you read this, that's exactly.
Well, stay there. We got a break. Come back with the death panels. Break it down, then we're going to the calls. Dr. Russell Blaylock, stay with us.
From his Central Texas Command Center, deep behind enemy lines, the information war continues. It's Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
1-800-259-9231. Tony, Mike, Andrew, Jeremy, Pat, your calls are coming up momentarily. Again, Dr. Blaylock, we could have you back up in the next few weeks for another full show just on the health care plan. But I go back to this. I've read the same subsections you're reading. My dad's a physician, so growing up, I know enough about how health care works. He's also been a medical care consultant to both hospitals and dental offices, so I can specifically read this and understand a lot of it. But I've seen what the experts have said as well, and I've read it. It's very clear. This is a total takeover of 20% of our economy, and the lying about it. But you were getting into the death panels. I mean, it's Daschle. It's Rahm Emanuel's brother. It's the publications. At first, a few months ago, when they thought they had it, they were saying, yeah, you don't need these unnecessary tests. And I've watched House of Commons back when Tony Blair was in, admitting people were waiting 16, 18 months for brain surgeries that were 95% successful if you got it within 2 months, but if you didn't, you were dead. And they admitted this. I mean, I've got two people that work for me in England, the Watson brothers. Their healthcare system's a nightmare. And they now are saying, if you've had a bad life or you've smoked or you've done this, we're not going to give you the health care. So I keep going back to the lying when they attacked Sarah Palin, who, by the way, I don't like Sarah Palin. She was a fool to quit the governorship. You know, they put her in there as a ringer. But my point is, she's right. But instead they just say, oh, she's a liar, she's a dumb woman, she's an idiot. There's no death panels. When these bioethicist boards, these are death panels. Dr. Blaylock.
Well, you see, they're clever not using the term death panels or end-of-life death panels or anything like that. What they do is they leave it open-ended. For instance, they talk about end-of-life services and support, palliative and hospice. Well, if you know about hospice, what they did to them is you're allowed to, or you're supposed to transfer a patient to hospice if you think they'll die in 6 months. But physicians don't always know when someone would die, so some live a year or 2 years. Well, you have to take care of them and comfort them and give them their medication. Well, the government came in and said anybody living over 6 months will cut off all Medicare payments to, so you're going to be stuck with the cost. Well, the hospice program said, well, we can't assume this cost, so they started injecting the patients with morphine, so they would die within 6 months. And so the government policy pushed the hospice system to start ending patients' lives sooner than they would normally.
And now they're killing people in Europe even Newsweek admits this, but says it's beautiful and wonderful. I showed the article a few weeks ago. They're now killing people who are depressed, and the government will pay for that. But I know I interrupted you before you finished your full story along those whole lines, so go ahead. Well,
in the bill itself, it talks about, they say, well, it's not mandatory you have this counseling every 5 years. Well, that's a lie. Page 424, it says that this is a part of routine medical care, and the individuals will have the consultations every 5 years, and that if they develop a change in their medical condition, that is an injury or anything that could potentially be life consultations will occur more often, and they'll be updated. It also says that you will be referred to special national, state, and community-based organizations who will do the counseling. Well, that includes ACORN.
Exactly. So this is total political indoctrination, and I mean the horror stories of hospice, and it's different facilities are different, but the Wall Street Journal with Wesley Smith had a whole series of articles about people in government custody who were paralyzed neck down, begging for food and water and being killed.
Well, yeah, and of course this is what happens in England. In England, for instance, one of the government studies on the quality of the National Health Service found that in one city, 400 to 1,200 people died from what they described as appalling health care. That's just one city, 400 to 1,200 in a year. Now, you multiply that times the 60 million people in England, you're talking about 10,000, 20,000 or more people dying every year from appalling care. There's even stories of patients starving to death in hospital wards. And I had a friend of mine who lives in Louisiana, and he told me the story of one of his close friends whose daughter was a medical student. She went to England to work in the National Health Care Service to see what it was like. She developed pneumonia, was admitted to a hospital, and for 6 days she never saw a physician and never received any medication. She was progressively getting worse and was afraid she was going to die. She called home to her mother. Her mother flew to England, picked her up, flew her back home to Louisiana, and had an ambulance carried to the hospital. Now, that's how they treat the medical students. For 6 days, she wasn't even seen by a physician. She could have died.
Well, I mean, I watched the House of Commons, and for all you dumb, stupid, ignorant, gullible people out there who are watching this or listening who believe all these lies about how you're going to get free health care, the moon is not made of cheese and you're not getting free health care. And the government is working for big banks that want a new tax to pay off these tens of trillions they've stolen, and they're just going to grab the health care, tax you, keep the money, and then give you an aspirin for a heart attack like they do in these other socialist countries. So you better figure that out. I want to go to calls, Dr. Blaylock, but have you, after we take some, hit some more of what's going on in the health care plan. But Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's now in the White House advising, remember last week he said doctors shouldn't be so obsessed over their Hippocratic oath to do no harm from Hippocrates. And for the last decade, they haven't given the Hippocratic oath. I mean, they really are taking our doctors and nurses and taking them from being great, upstanding people, guardians of human dignity, and turning them into little Nazi ghouls. Can you speak to the Hippocratic oath and Emanuel's brother having the nerve to say, well, you shouldn't take it serious?
Well, the basis of the Hippocratic Oath was Hippocrates, and that was teaching physicians that you're to do everything you can for your patient, and you're never to take a life. Well, that, of course, was an attack on abortion, and so the left wing didn't like that at all. The left wing didn't like that at all. For physicians were not supposed to take lives. It also included euthanasia, meaning you're never to kill someone because you think they're a useless life. Well, they didn't like that either. So we have at least two things that was getting under the skin of the left: that's abortion and euthanasia. So they want the oath to be removed. Well, now with Ezekiel Emanuel, who's a physician, saying that this oath should be abandoned, and physicians are just too obsessed with the idea of saving lives, and we need to start letting these people go. They're just wasted effort, that they have no social utility. And, of course, that would also include all disabled people, because according to this lexicon, disabled people have no social utility. They have no purpose, and they're a drain on the economy. Therefore, we should just let them die. It even says in the Hastings Center that it has been a crazy idea to give dialysis to people because some are living 20 years on dialysis, and that we could have just let them go at the time that they developed renal failure. And they even, in one of the articles, said we should turn back to clock-on medicine. And instead of practicing high-technology medicine we have today, we should turn it back to the 1960s level and have that as our health care.
Doctor, is there any doubt in your incredibly deep breadth of research that these are eugenicists, and we have a eugenics guild running our modern society, and that at the core, it's just a rationale to be sadistic control freaks who are on power trips. I mean, most of these high-level people, they don't even think they're doing good. These are really dark people.
Well, yeah, I think it's a mixed group. I think there's some who, in their perverted way of thinking, think it's good. Some are just evil people from the core. But, if you read their literature, they really think this is something that's beneficial to society, is to get rid of what they call the human weeds. They said you weed a garden and get rid of the weeds. Well, that's what we have to do in society. It's filled with all these unfit, these people who don't deserve life, and we should weed them out by whatever methods we can. And they said, well, we know this public won't accept extermination camps, but if we could just deny them health care, they'll die off on their own.
And that's what Margaret Sanger, of course, said. You're repeating her, and then that's repeated. But really, the test of humanity is people that are more intelligent, stronger. We're meant to lift up the weak. At the moment we delve into this, we let pure wickedness out of the bottle and societies collapse.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you start reading what some of the so-called elite write, it's quite frightening. And like I said, the stage was set for Adolf Hitler in the 1900s, the 1800s. People were writing things that he eventually implemented. Same thing with Lenin and Stalin and Mao Zedong. There were people who wrote quite eloquent papers about controlling society and exterminating mass numbers of people. Well, along came a dictator strong enough to carry this out. What the average public sees is the dictator. They don't see the foundation that was set 50, 100 years before by these elitists. One of the things that scares me in this bill, it describes taking over the entire medical education system. It talks about in medical schools, anointing certain medical schools in which they will set the curriculum. They will educate the professors that are teaching the courses, also taking over nursing schools, dental schools, so that the physicians will be trained.
Well, sir, that's what the cybersecurity bill says. If you're connected to any servers, any IT, the way it's written, everything, special federally certified cybersecurity people must be there like it's a union, and you must serve them, and they must certify you to be, I mean, if this passes, to run this office, we're going to have federal goons in here, and that's what they're doing to medicine. I mean, folks, this is a control freak total takeover. Your phone call.
The Genesis Communications Radio Network proudly presents The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
Man, I wanted to get into things to protect yourself from this flu. Does Dr. Blaylock think it's all hype? Does the vaccine cause a hemorrhagic response? Do you get more sun to get vitamin D? Is that the answer? And we'll, right before he leaves us, we'll ask him that briefly, but let's go to calls. Tony in Jersey, you're on the air, Tony.
Good afternoon, Alex. Dr. Blaylock, how are you doing?
Hello.
I have a couple of questions about the swine flu shot, also, about the health care, but I'd like to make two comments, if I may, Alex.
Okay, that's two questions and two comments. Make it quick, please.
Okay. Number one, I do have some very interesting things that I'd like to discuss with you at a later time. I have your number. I'll get in touch with you.
Okay.
Second, I've never gone public with this, and Big Brother probably is not going to like it. In fact, I may even be in fear of my life.
Tony, please. That's a big preface. Just tell us, sir. We don't have a lot of time.
Okay. In 91, I tried to join the military. I went through the MEPS process where, it's the Military Entrance Process Center, where they give you shots and take your physical and all that stuff. Well, about 2 weeks afterwards, they called me into the office and told me that I had the AIDS virus. I am not gay. I have never had a blood transfusion. I do not do drugs of any kind.
Yeah, but about a third of the time they give you a false positive, sir.
Right. Well, anyway, it turns out that that's what it is. And after research and everything, I know where I got it, you know. And so my question is, number one, with someone in that situation, how is the swine flu vaccine and the health care going to affect them?
All right, listen, I appreciate your call. He's saying if he has an HIV virus, well, what will this do?
Well, if you have an HIV virus, you shouldn't have any vaccine. Number one, they don't work. Number two is if you have the vaccine and you're immunocompromised, you run a very high risk of developing autoimmune disease. So you're in a special category where most people's evaluation, you should not be vaccinated, and it's not going to protect you. So that would be my opinion.
Doctor, what about this spin we hear that before you're not supposed to vaccinate pregnant women, but now, that's the group that needs it first? Is that some attempt to make the vaccine look safe, or why pregnant women first?
Well, it was known some time ago that women who develop the flu during certain periods of their pregnancy have a very high incidence of their children becoming either autistic or developing schizophrenia when they get older. The incidence rate is high as 7 to 12-fold higher. It was thought that was due to the flu virus getting into the baby's nervous system. The studies have since shown that it's not that at all. It's the fact that mother's immune system is activated, and it's the immune cytokines that enter the baby that produce the damage. Well,
so the same information you discovered decades ago is now admitted in the medical journals.
Sure. And when you do this vaccination process, what you're doing, you're repeating that. You're massively increasing the pregnant woman's immune system cytokines, raising her baby's risk of autism or developing schizophrenia.
And is that because the baby own immune system attacks its nerves, or?
Yeah, it activates the immune system in the baby's brain, the microglia, producing this immunoexcitotoxic reaction. But that's been well demonstrated. They even know which cytokine does it, interleukin-6. So
they know this. They know this,
oh, yeah.
And they're telling women take it.
I know, and to me, it's just, I think it's the most insane thing you could possibly do. This has a very low communicability, this virus. And so a woman's chance during pregnancy at that particular age developing flu is pretty small, but if you give them all the vaccine, then it's 100%. They're all vaccinated. And the real dangerous thing about this vaccine, they talk about giving 3 vaccines in 21 days, which if you know neuroscience, that is particularly dangerous because of the intense immune activation in the brain, the immunoexcitotoxicity in the mother's brain, and particularly in the developing baby's brain.
Is that called a cascade?
Well, it's a cytokine cascade, and what happens is that these immune cells produce so many cytokines, these destructive immune chemicals, it starts destroying brain connections and making the brain develop abnormally. And they think that's what produces the autism.
Which eugenicist Bertrand Russell said, we will give children injections to brain damage them to make them part of the servant class. But I bet the government's just idiots. They just so happen to want to target kids and women and people with something that brain damages them. I mean, this is just amazing. Mike, Andrew, Jeremy, Pat, we're getting to all your calls. Final segment, Dr. Russell Blaylock. His website's BlaylockReport.com. He's got books, DVDs, everything available there. There is no doubt that education, the medical system, our industries, everything's being regulated, taken over, shut down. They've used the third world labor to shut down industry. Everything is about creating a monopoly. The government wants to wreck society so they can consolidate it, just like Mao and Lenin with their great leap forwards. This is a system of control. Order out of chaos. Dr. Russell Blaylock's our guest. I was giving out the Newsmax.com newsletter that they have with Dr. Blaylock. His main site, the one to get the books, the videos, all the great materials, is RussellBlaylockMD.com. RussellBlaylockMD.com, or just Google the name Russell Blaylock. We can find his writings and the materials all right there on the site. I do want to encourage everybody to also visit our online video bookstore, get our books and videos and T-shirts and materials, not just because they're great materials and wake people up when you share them, but because it also supports what we're doing here overall. This operation costs a lot of money to run, and we also bring in all these guests who we then, in turn, support. This show is a huge platform for getting the truth out, and I feel really good having doctors and scientists and neurologists on and virologists to tell you about the vaccines, the food, the GMO, all of it, because this is eugenics, this is real, this is what the elite are doing to us. Let's go ahead and take some more calls. Mike in Missouri, you're on the air with Dr. Blaylock. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Alex and Dr. Blaylock. About a few years ago, I had an accident, and I became disabled. I've got a spinal injury. I'm in the managed care system here in St. Louis, and I go to the medical school here. I've been taking the vaccinations that they give every year. I guess it's been 7 or 8 years now. I've developed arthritis, and I never had psoriasis before. And my question is psoriasis, could that have come from the immunization that I've been getting?
Well, it's possible because it is an autoimmune disease, but psoriasis is associated with arthritis. There is a rheumatoid arthritis syndrome associated with psoriasis. Now, whether or not you just spontaneously develop psoriasis or the vaccines, it's hard to tell, but it is an autoimmune disease, and we're seeing a lot of psoriasis now. Like I said, all of the autoimmune diseases are increasing astronomically.
Can I just add, sir, that if you'll search engine vaccines arthritis, this is not Dr. Blaylock or my opinion. They know in all the studies with rodents, they get it. I mean, baby mice and rats get it. And you're having an autoimmune response in your joints. This is a more important question. Doctor, what can he do to detox and he's got his immune system all cranked up. What can he do before he gets diabetes, before he gets real brain damage, I mean, is there something he can do to detox or to get the swelling down?
Well, I can't give specific advice over the program, but just in general, what you want to do is if you're having an autoimmune reaction, you want to increase your omega-3 oil intake. There's a Norwegian oil that you can get that has a balance of the EPA, DHA components that reduces this autoimmune reaction. Works very well for a lot of autoimmune diseases. You just take a teaspoon a day, every day. But vitamin D3 is the most important. It is an immune modulator. It prevents overreactivity of the immune system, and there's good evidence that people who have rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or these other diseases have a deficiency in vitamin D3. You may have heard about multiple sclerosis and the connection to sun exposure. You can take vitamin D3 in a dose of 2,000 to 5,000 units a day, and that can significantly reduce many of these autoimmune diseases. And that's a good way to prevent the flu from causing bad injury to you. Because when you take vitamin D3, it stimulates the body to produce what's called antimicrobial peptides. And they are very powerful at killing viruses, bacteria, fungi. And there's evidence that people who have high vitamin D levels rarely have any sort of bad effects from flu infections or other types.
And, sir, isn't it showing that cancer rates go way down from people getting moderate sun every day? That cancer rates go way down from people getting moderate sun every day?
Yeah, it's with elevated vitamin D3 in the body, it's about a 50% reduction in a number of cancers, particularly breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer. And it's for the same reason, because all of these things are produced for chronic inflammation, and vitamin D3 reduces inflammation. Now, vitamin D3 is the functional form of the vitamin. You can buy it as vitamin D3. But the recommendation now is by the health authorities is 2,000 units of vitamin D3 for everybody, even children, every day. And if you give it to your children, you'll find they rarely get infections.
mean, this goes back to, and again, I'm not a biologist or a brain surgeon like you, but just reading medical text, I can get the essence of it. But that's why they call the British limeys, because their guys weren't collapsing on the deck 10,000 miles away from home because they carried little limes with them. That kept their collagen up because the vitamin C was needed with the vitamin D absorption somehow at a metabolic level. I don't quite understand that. But I mean, look, a lot of America has scurvy. We're not getting sunlight. We're not eating good food. We're eating a bunch of crud. I mean, in layman's terms, is that good advice, doctor?
Yeah, all of these vitamins interact. People don't generally, and a lot of nutritionists don't seem to understand that the vitamins have interactions that benefit the functional ability of the vitamin. So you take vitamin D, you take vitamin E, you take carotenoids, the other B vitamins, and selenium, and magnesium. All of these things drastically reduce autoimmune disorders. They stimulate your healthy immunity to help you resist viruses and bacteria. People that die of flu are generally immune suppressed. Normal, healthy people with good immune systems rarely die or even get seriously ill from the flu. So when you see these teenagers, for instance, in the studies on this flu, 32% of the children that died had asthma, which is an immune disorder. Other ones have multiple ailments, diabetes, heart disease, other inflammatory immune disease.
Well, look at old folks who never get out and get sun.
Well, and they also have difficulty converting the sunlight into vitamin D, so they need to take the supplement. And it's been shown that until you get above at least 1,000 units of vitamin D3, your blood levels really don't rise. When you're in the sun for 30 minutes, you're getting about 10,000, 20,000 units of vitamin D3 manufactured.
Man, I love it. I can have a headache, be tired, go out 30 minutes in the sun in my backyard, and it's like energized. I mean, it's like a million times better than a cup of coffee. We got to let the doctor go here in just a few minutes. Mike, I hope that answered your questions. Are they pushing vaccines on you when you go in to get medical care? He dropped off. I know they are pushing it now. Andrew in Toronto, Canada, you're on the air with Dr. Blaylock.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment and tell you about a new tool I've created for the InfoWar and ask a quick question. The question, in light of all the denial, the huge level of denial everywhere, and where we are at in terms of the timing of everything, I mean, there's a lot of people that when you point them on to certain resources, they shut off when they hear about similarities to not.
I hear you. I got to jump, though. I can't get into other subjects. I want to jam in some more calls. Dr. Blaylock, what do you do when you, even as an eminent brain surgeon, neurologist, your work's all over the medical literature, trailblazing, you don't really toot your horn on so many fronts. I mean, I would imagine you run into people that are just doubting. What do you say to people that just want to take shots every year, want to be unhealthy, want to drink aspartame? What do you do? Move on to folks you can warn?
Well, that's it. It's a free country, and if you want to do it, then you just have to accept the consequences. I'll present you with the evidence if you want it. You can look at it, you can take it or leave it, and you'll pay for ignoring it. But that's the benefit of a free country, or one of the effects of a free country. The government's the one that wants to force people to do things. But if you want to eat hamburgers and French fries every day, then so be it. I've warned you. So when you have your heart attack or your stroke, then you can't say you weren't warned.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk to Jeremy in Texas. Jeremy, you're on the air.
Yeah, Dr. Lott, Mr. Jones, everything in Obamacare, everything with having to do with the vaccines is an extreme danger to life or property. And I wonder your opinion, and every time that we try to wake up somebody, it will not make the news. What if patriots across the United States begin flying the United States flag Union side down as a public display to try to wake people up?
A lot of people are doing that, and then when neighbors ask why you're doing it, you can explain it's a country in distress. That's why we've had the poster contest that we're extending entries out till next Tuesday, where people put up posters of political ideas and then videotape it. The contest is you got to videotape it and get that submission into us. And it's having a great effect. Look what we did with the Obama Joker poster nationwide. That probably made it in, conservatively that I've seen, 60, 70, 80, probably more newspapers from Tokyo to Los Angeles, TV stations covering it, and that's just what our listeners did. So, yes, we need to somehow... Dr. Blaylock, I wanted to take medical questions for you. So many of these are on other subjects. Let's talk to Pat in Ohio. Pat, do you have a medical question for Dr. Blaylock?
Yes. Hello, Alex and Dr. Blaylock. My mom, she suffers from Alzheimer, and in the past month, she's been really regressing. And I need to know, is there any type of modern-day technology that can help to improve her condition? And I
exercise?
Need a contact number. Well, I do exercise with her, but she's gotten to the point where she won't even eat now unless I feed her or someone feeds her. She gets into a sleep, a stupor, like. And that's what I need. I need a contact number also, a telephone number.
A telephone number for who?
Dr. Blaylock.
Oh, I don't see patients any longer. Well, Alzheimer's disease is an inflammatory brain disease. It's a chronic brain inflammation. When the elderly are getting really sleepy, it means the brain is more inflamed. And as the Alzheimer patient reaches toward the end of the disease, there's a lot of loss of cells as well as connections. The only thing that I know that I generally recommend for people with Alzheimer's is drastically increase your vitamin D intake, because that's the best way to reduce your brain inflammation. Magnesium, the fish oil, all in combination.
Is your mother on magnesium and fish oil and vitamin D, ma'am?
Yeah, she's an integrative medicine doctor, and they put on omega-3 and fish oil and a variety of stuff.
She's not drinking Diet Coke or eating...
No. She drinks just juice, mainly water, a lot of water anymore, and she doesn't drink pop, and of course she doesn't drink liquor. And
is it chlorine? It's not tap water, is it?
No. She's been off that.
Well, again, I'm not practicing medicine here. I'm just going from what I've heard doctors say. At a point, doctor, isn't it just the brain loss is so great that it's a downward spiral?
Yeah, when you see people who have Alzheimer's, their brain immune reaction far exceeds normal aging. And as the disease progresses, the inflammatory reaction increases, and the glutamate in the brain starts elevating, and the brain becomes more sensitive. So anything to reduce brain inflammation is the main thing. I don't want to hog my supplement, but I have the supplement for brain inflammation that you can look at on my website and see if that's something.
Oh, absolutely. Go to RussellBlaylockMD.com. It's brain lipid and brain repair, and really has all the medical science. But, ma'am, what's your mother's name? I'll ask folks to...
Ollie Collins.
Okay, well, I'll ask folks to pray for your mother. And, just look, they're getting people 35, 40 years old with Alzheimer's now. They're poisoning the hell out of us, and it's just a real shame. We got to all watch it and take care of each other to get out of this. And God bless you, ma'am. I'm sorry to hear that. Dr. Blaylock, I got to get you back on in the next month or so. We're very thankful for your time and very thankful for all you're doing. The books, the videos, the materials are all at RussellBlaylockMD.com. Thank you for spending time with us, sir.
Well, thank you, Alex, and God bless you.
God bless you. Yeah, it's painful taking phone calls like that one. I want to come back and hit a little bit on the Van Jones thing, because they're trying to tie in the 9/11 truth, and I waited to go to calls. I'll have Blaylock back and do 2 hours just with calls. And I wasn't trying to be mean to callers I hung up on, but I just can't talk about other subjects when he's on, because I'm talking about the brain right now.